Hi, everyone, and welcome to Feed and Grain Chat. I'm your host, Elise Schaefer, editor of Feed and Grain. This edition of Feed and Grain Chat is brought to you by Watt Global Media and feedandgrain.com. Feedandgrain.com is your source for the latest news, product, and equipment information for the grain handling and feed manufacturing industries. Today, I'm joined by Dan Gorlick, Virginia Cooperative Extension's Associate Director for Economy, Community, and Food, and Kevin Sperlin, a Virginia Cooperative Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent and Unit Coordinator. As part of the team that assessed the damages to Virginia's agriculture industry in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, they're here to reveal the disaster's economic toll and share how recovery is coming along. Hi, Kevin and Dan. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Elise. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Now, Kevin, you and fellow Virginia Cooperative Extension agents assessed the total price tag of damage from Hurricane Helene at over $159 million. Can you describe what you witnessed on the ground? And Dan, can you break down which commodities and livestock sectors were the most impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on. And the first thing is I got out to do some of the initial damage assessments. There were numerous trees that were blown down, which severely limited access to parts of the county. Even my own driveway, I had to remove several trees to get out. There was bridges and culverts that were washed out due to flooding. We kind of had twofold issues with this particular storm. The wind damage took down our power and communications infrastructure. It blew roofs off of barns, blew sheds over. One fairly new hay shed that was just completely flipped up on its top. The flooding was unlike anything we had experienced in Grayson County, where I work. All the streams and rivers had extreme levels of flooding, historic levels of flooding that damaged infrastructure, roads. They also caused other issues. Beef cattle industry is big in our area, so a lot of fence damage. We had debris caught up in the fences, or the fences were completely washed away. A lot of debris and sediment was deposited in fields, whether that's crop fields, hay fields, pastures, areas that look like pristine green hayfield either look like a mud flat or a beach with so much deposited silt or sand. I saw equipment that had floated a half a mile down the river from its origin. 175 horsepower tractor that's completely full of mud and basically not operable. Cornfields that were basically knocked down and demolished. I saw campers and kayaks sitting in the middle of these fields. Livestock losses, thankfully, were not tremendous, but we did have some losses. Some of those were due to the flooding that actually carried some of those animals away. We also had animals that ate some toxic plants, wild cherry in particular, that those trees had blown down and we know were toxic. We also had some that just the trees fell on the animals during the windstorm aspect. We had feed supplies that were either damaged or washed away, such as hay and even bagged and bulk feed. Things that couldn't be accessed, like the water systems that had no power to run, those water systems. And we've had a lot of farmers that have participated in programs to fence off riparian areas and limit access to surface water. This was one instance where that was a real hindrance, where we didn't have those alternative water sources live and available because of the power issues. If they couldn't access those streams readily, then there was certainly some issues with water access for the animals. So those were some of the main things that I saw just initially as I was getting out. It was certainly in our area catastrophic.
Hi, Elise. I want to add one thing to what Kevin shared, and I learned this from Kevin, by the way. So Kevin has spoken about how the New River flows from south to north, so a lot of the water funneling in from the tributaries in North Carolina, went into the New, and then by the time the New reached some areas of Kevin's County, what was it, Kevin? 22 feet, I think, is the flood stage you had mentioned for the New River being the second highest in recorded history. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of the scale of the flooding in the river, New River in particular. With specific regard to our agricultural damage assessment estimates, Elise, I think you mentioned the figure 159.3 million. So we will reference that as at least or more than 159.3 million. Of that, Grayson County, where Kevin is located, accounted for $61 million of those damages, or a little over 38%. Wythe County stood 22.7 million. Smith County, 18.4 million. Washington County, just under 13 million. Carroll County, 12.2 million. Tazewell County, 9 million, and so on. We had 21 localities, so 20 counties in one city that reported agricultural damages relating to Helene. That includes over 3,600 farms that were impacted. Broadly summarized, our damage assessment categories of vegetable and crop losses were 31.4 million, livestock, aquaculture, apiary types of losses at 1.5 million. Total facilities, land, and infrastructure losses at almost 120 million. Of the vegetable and crop loss categories, the top three were timber at about 25.9 million, hay about 3.3 million, pumpkins at 2.3 million. Within that livestock, aquaculture, and apiary category, you're looking at $1.2 million in beef cattle related losses, $130,000 in trout, a little over 15,000 in dairy cows. And within the facilities, land, and infrastructure, and Kevin spoke to this a little bit, but fence was far and away the most heavily impacted category at 54.3 million. And then structural, basically load-bearing types of structures, outbuildings, barns, etc., at 27.8 million. And land damages, debris, these types of things, about 25.5 million thereabouts.
Certainly a catastrophic damage, and we're sorry to hear that. Now, Kevin, how is the damage to things like roads and transportation networks impacting the ability to move crops and agriculture products through the supply chain?
Yeah, so great question. Initially, in just the few days right after the storm, our emergency operations center in the county had a map of the entire county. They had every road that was closed coded in red, and it was nearly every road at the beginning. And as roads opened up, which Dr. Gorlick addressed, our Department of Transportation crews, Virginia Department of Forestry, other volunteer chainsaw crews were out trying to open up roads, primarily for emergency services personnel initially. Those roads were opened up at a tremendous rate. It was incredible how quickly they were able to get most of these roads opened back up. We did have complete loss of power countywide, loss of communications infrastructure, no internet, no phone countywide for the first 48 hours or so. How that impacted us as far as moving crops and transporting goods, we were nearly at the end of our crop season. So that aspect of it was not as tremendous as it could have been. Probably the crop most affected in Grayson County in particular were pumpkins. A lot of pumpkins are grown here for the holiday season. We did have losses there with flood damage, as well as not being able to get those out in a timely manner. We also had a lot of cattle that needed to get moved in short time frame because they didn't have access to grass because the fences were gone. But the place, we had to collect and get those cattle confined in areas where we did have adequate fencing. So trying to get cattle moved to areas where they did have grass was a bit of a problem. As far as getting product to market, again, just the speed and recovery was phenomenal. And I don't think that there were tremendous adverse effects of that initially.
Do you have any estimation, Kevin, of how long the recovery might take for the affected farms and communities in Virginia?
I would say, Elise, that 3 to 5 years minimum for rebuilding the infrastructure. I know it's going to be a months-long process just to get full assessment of what they're going to need to do. But I also want to make the point that there's a mental trauma aspect to this event that will be lifelong. And so people won't ever forget this storm and our recovery efforts that have supported them and brought hope through donations, had to support them through this. That aspect has been so rewarding, and understanding that it is going to take years potentially for some of the mental aspects and stress of this to be recovered from, far longer than rebuilding the actual infrastructure.
Dan, can you tell us about the extension's available resources for affected communities and ways that our viewers might be able to help support your relief efforts?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So in Virginia Cooperative Extension, we have programs in agriculture, natural resources, family consumer science, 4-H youth development, and there are family and financial and youth impacts from the hurricane in addition to the agriculture and natural resources components that we've been talking about. So I just wanted to let folks know that we do have those other resources available to them to support youth, to support families, to support communities through those broader programs. With specific regard to agriculture, very shortly after Hurricane Helene passed through, our agriculture agents had started the Southwest Virginia Agriculture Relief Program. Essentially, this effort has a needs assessment component and it has a donor assessment component. And there is a form for each that we'll hope to link through the podcast, where impacted individuals can fill out the need assessment form, or if they're too humble to do that, an agent can fill out the form on their behalf as they travel throughout their localities and see the needs that individuals are facing. And then we ask our donors to fill out the donor assessment form, and that enables the agents to then track that and to match donations to farmers in need. We do have 9 to 10 collection and distribution sites throughout the region. These are not so much operated in a manner where things are just stockpiled, for example. These are very much pass-through sites. So there are a lot of cases, because we're aware of the needs, that the donations are just able to go straight from the donor to the recipient without having to stop at a distribution site. There are also numerous cases where we do receive a truckload of hay, for example, a semi-trailer of hay at a site like Kevin has in Galax, where it is then unloaded, but then in fairly short order, it is distributed out to agricultural producers, the recipients. I should mention that there are short-term, medium-term, and long-term needs associated with this event. Kevin spoke earlier a little bit to the idea that, the immediate needs in the hours immediately following Hurricane Helene, you're looking at life-saving activities, property-saving activities. At that point in time, maybe hay wasn't first and foremost on everyone's minds, for example. Now, as we're, and have been for the last few weeks, looking at needs that farmers have and looking ahead to the winter, we know that, for example, donations of hay are going to be very helpful, very important to help our folks get through the winter. And so that is our agent who's coordinating the Southwest Virginia Agricultural Relief Program has estimated 6,000 round bales of hay will be necessary to meet the need just to get through this winter. So then I guess I would encourage folks, if they're in a situation where they can assist with donations, to take a look at the donor form to help us get a sense of what they might be able to share. Lots of cases of farmers helping each other, community members helping each other, Virginians helping Virginians. And, it's been a disaster like this. It really brings out the best in people, the humanity in people. It's been very heartwarming to see how folks have helped their neighbors and helped each other. One last thing I think that I'll mention is the Virginia Cooperative Extension Hurricane Helene Resources webpage. It does include information from Virginia Cooperative Extension to assist people with recovering from flood. That may be flooded hay, it may be mold in the home, maybe mental health resources, as Kevin was alluding to. It also has links to partner organization resources provided by Virginia Farm Bureau, for example. Also, our Secretary of Ag and Forestry's office has resources on there. And I do want to mention, in terms of the overall partnership and the relief effort, Virginia Cattlemen's Association and Virginia Farm Bureau. They are able to take financial donations that will be dedicated to assisting with Hurricane Helene recovery efforts. So Virginia Cooperative Extension is leading the effort for in-kind donations. Partners like Cattlemen's Association and Virginia Farm Bureau are taking the financial donations through their organization. And both of their foundations are also linked to that webpage that I mentioned previously, which you can simply use your search engine of choice to look up Virginia Cooperative Extension Hurricane Helene resources, and that should take you to that site. And then as far as preparing for these things in the future, to kind of get in that mindset and go through that process, Virginia Cooperative Extension does have a publication, Managing Climate Risks in Extreme Weather in Agriculture, by Dr. Julie Shortridge and Mitchell Paoletti, that has some important considerations for farmers that are looking to prepare in advance should something happen to them.
Thank you both for your time today and for joining me.
Thank you, Elise, for having us.
Yes, thank you, Elise, for taking an interest in our story.
Of course. That's all for today's Feed and Grain Chat. If you'd like to see more videos like this, sign up for our YouTube channel, sign up for the Industry Watch Daily e-newsletter, or go to feedandgrain.com and search for videos. Thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you next time.